right, so good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in from across Canada and beyond. My name is Jesse Hildebrand. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and we get the great privilege of getting to partner with the amazing folks at the CCIUCN to highlight some incredible stories and people over the last few months. So we did 2 programs back in September and August. They're both on our YouTube channel if you want to check those out. Everything that we've ever done with the CCIUCN is right there for you to explore and discover. We've got another one coming up in the new year sometime. Stay tuned for that in early 2024. But I'm so thrilled today to welcome you back for a really exciting story of a really special place. So I'm going to turn you over to one person in a minute to introduce our speaker du jour. It's like a nesting doll of exciting people today for you all joining in on YouTube. But we're going to learn a little bit today about the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Reserve Network. So the Niagara Escarpment, I had the privilege of living near for over a year. It's one of the most special, beautiful places on planet Earth. If you have never been to Niagara region and gone beyond the falls, you should absolutely just leave this broadcast and go do that right now. It's a really special part of the world, and there's a really special conservation story behind it, bringing together a lot of different groups for a common good. So I'm going to zip my lip from there. I'm going to turn you over to Laurel McIver, who's going to introduce our speaker of the day. Thank you so much for joining us today, Laurel, with the world's best backdrop, and take us away.
Thanks, Jesse. My name's Laurel McIver, and I work for Parks Canada, but I am a member of the communication committee for the Canada Committee for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And this really pleased to be part of this this network, and we work with Canadians all across the country to look at conserving and increasing how we conserve and value nature. And again, part of this is that we are continuing the work of the global International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and do this through our Canadian members. I'm really pleased today to welcome you all to the 3rd webinar of the year, and I'm very honored to have Liette Vasseur as our presenter today. Liette is a longtime member for the Canada Committee for IUCN, and she's also a super active member of the Commission for the Ecosystem Management, which she now is the Deputy Chair of. So I know she's a very accomplished person. Liette, I'd like to turn this over to you and let you finish the introductions of you and your amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Laurel. I'll just share my screen with my presentation. Good. Great. So I hope that everybody is looking and can see it. So I was invited to present around promoting conservation through the organization with a co-governance structure that we have for the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Network. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge that where we are gathering for me here today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon, One Pond Agreement. Today, this place is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledges, reminds us of the great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. And this is, I should say, very true for the Niagara region and the escarpment, especially considering the historical importance of the Niagara Escarpment in terms of a bridge for First Nations to be able to move and to be able to share among the different nations. At the same time, the Niagara region being the place where the large treaties in 1764 were signed here with the British, as well as you know, the 1812 war that led to having Canada staying as Canada and not becoming American. But before starting about the question of the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere, I wanted to just give a little bit of background related to where we're coming from, because people may be a little bit confused sometimes. It's part of UNESCO, and how is it working? So as you know, the United Nations created the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, in 1945. And in 1957, we had the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. So this is where the umbrella at the federal level we are located as a biosphere. And the national commissions are quite important for UNESCO in terms of liaison, information, coordination, mobilization, consultation, and promotion of all the values of the United Nations and the UNESCO directly. And so the CCIUCN, as we call it, the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, tried to bring the voice of Canadian to the international scenes, facilitate the implementation of UNESCO's activities in Canada, provide recommendation based on civil society input, and serve as the forum for reflection and catalyst of collective action. And I should say I was very honored to be president of the Canadian Commission for UNESCO for 4 years. And it's quite an experience to understand all the linkages between the United Nations, UNESCO, and in fact, IUCN, since we just came back last week from the 75th anniversary of IUCN in Fontainebleau in France, where it was created by UNESCO in 1948. So what is interesting with CCIUCN is that we are a network of networks. So for example, the Youth Advisory Group and the Biosphere Reserve. I should say in Canada, we don't call them Biosphere Reserve anymore. Either we say only biospheres, like we do for the Niagara Escarpment, or we will talk about biosphere regions. The word reserve has been removed. And these are just a few that you may probably know, from Tlekop to Tatway to Funday and Manicouagan-Wapishka. So we are under what we call the UNESCO Men and Biosphere Program, which is under the UNESCO directly. And this was created through the Intergovernmental Scientific Program in 1971 during the General Conference, which just finished, by the way, the one for this year, this weekend. And the goal is to seek answers on how humanity was affecting the biosphere and what could be done to better avoid further degradation. So that's really the initial goal in 71 of what the Biosphere Men and Biosphere Program was created for. And how is it done? Well, first by looking at conservation and sustainable use of ecosystem, species, and genetic resources. And this is done also at the same time then fostering economic and human development, as well as supporting the use of education and training, monitoring, and other intervention to establish and sustain complex, specific relationship between conservation and development. And what you have in terms of the little graph there, it's showing the way that is usually portrayed like an egg, if you want, which the center, in this case, the green, is the core area. And this is usually where you have research, but mostly conservation. Then you have the buffer area. The buffer area is where you have also some research, but you have also education and training. There may be a bit some tourism, but sustainable tourism at that point. There may be some human settlement, but the transition area is where we usually promote sustainable development because you have more human settlement. There will be still research, there will be still training, but it will be kind of a mix. I should say I'm talking from Brock University. Brock University is kind of a special place because some of our buildings are directly in the core of the biosphere, and the rest of us are pretty much in the buffer area right now. Now, I wanted to talk about the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Network. I should say that we are officially only a year and a half old as an organization, although you'll see why it's more complex than that in terms of our birth and how things have evolved in the past 2 years. So the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Reserve was established by UNESCO in 1990. And we have to realize that we don't have an egg structure in our case because we are a very extensive stretch of forested land, which is the escarpment, and it's 725 kilometers. It goes from south central Ontario. So Jesse was talking about the Glen, for example. This is the start of the biosphere in the south, and it goes up to Tobermory in the Bruce Peninsula. So that's all the different component, and that means that we are going through major biomes, including the boreal needle leaf forest to the temperate broadleaf forest and the Carolinian forest when we look at the Niagara region. So the escarpment has been under the Niagara Escarpment Commission since 1990. What happened is every 10 years, there's a periodic review from UNESCO. And in 2012 was the last periodic review. And the recommendation that came back in 2013 was that it was no longer appropriate for the Niagara Escarpment Commission to be the convener and the regulator at the same time. So what happened, and I will explain a bit more the process, but in 2017, there have been some consultation with the different First Nations along the escarpment. And in 2018, the Niagara Escarpment Commission decided to hire a consultant to try to figure out what should be done. And the report came in July and September 2019. And from this report, the NEC transferred its role and responsibilities to the Transition Leadership Committee. So I was one of the members, as well as, in fact, we were 4 people that were on that committee. And to be able to really think about how do we change this component. So we cannot be anymore with the government agency. And to see why it's important to understand is that UNESCO had 2 recommendations for the continuation of the designation of the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere. The first is that it had to become a grassroots organization. And the second, which is also very important, is to re-engage with Indigenous people. So in 2017, Plenty Canada prepared and was in charge of the consultation with the First Nations along the Niagara Escarpment. And they created a report, but nothing really moved. So they never really engaged, in fact, with the Indigenous people. And this caused a lot of issues for the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, for UNESCO itself. You have to remember that UNESCO is also respecting the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People under it. And therefore, they were underlying this component. So in 2021, I should say, there was a little pause in between. So we started in October, November 2019. Unfortunately, as you know very well, 2020 kind of stopped a lot of our work. And in fact, we were for pretty much all year of 2020 unable to really work. I finally, because probably I'm a little bit the stubborn one, decided that we still needed to do something, even if we were only by online and trying to do by email. And I decided in December 2020 to first acquire that famous report. It took a bit some time, I have to admit. And at the same time, I decided to reread the We Rise Together. That was written by Pathway One. And for me, it became very important because it was mentioned directly in the report. And it really jumped to my face that the report was perfect in terms of the step that needed to be done. So after writing to Plenty Canada, having meeting, the Transition Leadership Committee and Plenty Canada signed a memorandum of understanding to work together on this new co-governance structure. and that led by March 2022 to have officially incorporated as a non-for-profit under provincial regulation. It's important to understand that why we wanted a co-governance structure, and we wanted to demonstrate that it is possible for a biosphere to have both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people working together, and following, the importance of ethical space and to to make sure of the conservation and sustainability of the designation and the biosphere itself. So the network is now an official entity that is working on the mandate and the designation of the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere in consultation, as you can imagine, with UNESCO, but especially with the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, since they are the one who relay the information to UNESCO. And I just wanted to give you a bit of an update of how we're doing, and since it's a very newer organization, and especially see how probably other people may want to be involved. You never know. And how this is important. And you'll see that with pretty much all the activities we're doing, we're really getting this co-governance structure working together. And it takes more time. And this is one thing that sometimes it's probably not well understood, but it really brings different perspective, which are very important when we think about long-term survival of our Mother Earth. So the Indigenous engagement is very important. And here, the woman in the middle there is Charlene. She is a water walker. She is a wonderful woman, and she's our co-chair of the network, and with her family, so 3 generations together on the top of the Bruce Peninsula. So it's really showing what's happening. She lives in the northeast tip of the Sauguay Bruce Peninsula. And it's important for us to have the First Nations, the 6 nations of the Grand River, for example, is part of it. And I should say that we are now working, and this is something that we're quite proud and happy to be able to do, is to gradually integrate into the biosphere Manitoulin Island. So we're working again initially, in fact, with the First Nations from Manitoulin, who will be the one drawing where would be the core, the buffer, and the transition that they would like to see. But as you can imagine, engagement is essential there. Engagement with all people that will be in Manitoulin. But that will be in our 10-year plan for the next periodic review, which I will talk a bit later. There's a question of conservation, and conservation is currently a very important aspect of the federal government. So all biosphere in Canada have received funding from the Environment Climate Change Canada to develop a series of other effective conservation measures. And I should say that we're quite pleased to say that along, and especially in the buffer area, we now have Cootes Paradise, that is an OECM, as well as 11 conservation areas here that have just been designated as OECMs as well. So we are increasingly pushing for that. I should say that there's a momentum to have many of our land being protected under that are not in the core area, but in the buffer. And that will help to increase connectivity and better protection of our natural environment. We have also other groups that are really helping, like the Field and Stream Rescue Team. This is a grassroots action from the Hamilton-Alton region. We have also the Bird Migration Monitoring and Cap Head Nature Reserve with the Sauguay Bruce Peninsula. So several action from different groups, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and we all share data together now to be able to bring the importance of conservation in our region. And that is especially for biodiversity. We created in July the NEB-Biodiversity BioBlitz, which is under the iNaturalist. We started with 150,000, there's a zero missing, observation in July, and now we're all close to 180,000 observation. It's amazing how people have been really involved. There are groups like in Beaver Valley, for example, that are got together and to do a blitz even for the fall. So there's really an interest and engagement of the community along the escarpment to try to bring more data together. And that's very important. We need to show what we have. This is a very hot spot for biodiversity. We need to protect it, but we need to celebrate it. So we have also a Greenbelt Foundation project with the Bruce Trail Conservancy, Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy, the Royal Botanical Gardens, Niagara College, and Brock University. And this is to enhance biodiversity awareness in the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere. And we're just right now putting the last bits to have the new signage that will be put at several places along the escarpment to explain the biodiversity, the importance of biodiversity through a QR code. We have also created a research network. We have now over 20 partners from different institutions. They are from colleges, universities, and some institutes. And one thing that we are talking a lot and that we're pushing is the 2-eye seeing in ecological research. And we have done already some of the project on traditional medicinal plants. And so, for example, we did 2 summers ago the Laura Sokor Legacy Trail and identified traditional plants that were there from the beginning and that were most likely used by the First Nations. And what is important is we did the full 2-eye seeing, which we have the scientific information in one side, but on the other side, we have also the translation into Mohawk of the significance of these plants. So it's a beautiful combination and showing the importance of the traditional knowledge related to these plants. And it links to several aspects of the NEBN in terms of education, in terms of conservation of biodiversity, in terms of traditional knowledge. It's really trying to connect people to nature in many different ways. Education and youth engagement is also very essential for any biosphere. We have involved, I should say, in the development of the network, students from colleges and universities. For example, the Niagara College students were the one who were able to create and establish the BioBlitz and now the NEBN-Biodiversity project under iNaturalist. Brock University students have done several projects on ecosystem services and other components. We have also redid the monitoring of permanent biodiversity plots. And we have for the younger one also the Blue Mountain Wild School, which is a school that is not in classroom, but in the woods. So the students are really learning from the natural environment, not from the classroom. Sustainable development is also a very important component. And I should say that when we had the fear of the Green Belt, we put an official statement about the importance of biodiversity and conservation of the Green Belt and the Niagara Escarpment because of sustainability of motherhood, but also all the communities that are living there. I've been working, for example, with Peller Estate, and they are now pushing all their grape growers to become sustainable vineyards. So that means that they are reducing and some avoiding tillage, pesticide, fertilizer, to bring back as much as possible the natural environment. And you can see this is one of the site where we work, where you will have different species in the alley, that it's not just empty with no vegetation. It's not bare ground. And we have a lot more stories. And you can see our website, which is nebn.org, NEBN Network, NEBN Network, and .org. And you'll see many of the other stories. There are so many of them, I cannot put them all today. The other component that is important under the Lima plant, which is the part of the MAB program that we have to work with, is the question of climate change. As you know, our biodiversity and our ecosystem are having to deal with climate change. And so that has been also another aspect quite important. We are privileged to have here at Brock some of the researchers who have been working on Crawford Lake to become an indicators of climate change in the Anthropocene. And they have been working with First Nations, because this is a place that was super important for Indigenous people. And so be able to recount the history of the lake from a lot of ages is important to understand, first of all, where it's coming from several million away. Another component of the program that and the mandate of Biosphere is the evaluation of ecosystem services. So I have a course that is called Ecosystem Ecology, and they have been able to do quite a lot of work from wetlands to urban development. But we have also a lot of other components that is being done, like in Owen Sound and the loss of green space, which is becoming an issue there because of growth of the population, especially coming from Toronto. But I had also a student under Erasmus program, so he's in fact a student's exchange from Europe, who did a recent evaluation, in fact just finished last month, of the escarpment itself, the core part of the escarpment, using the land use and land change component. And it's estimated at $1.8 billion. So it's around $9,000 per hectare. So quite important to think about that. And when we look at ecosystem services, we're looking at provisioning services like food, fresh water, but also regulating services, water storage, purification, flood, climate and air quality, pollination, carbon sequestration. So it's super important to keep within the biosphere as much as possible conservation components. Now, one thing that is important to know is that we also have to be careful about the designation. We are now towards our periodic review, which is done every 10 years. So what happened is every 10 years, the biosphere has to prove that it has done enough work to be designated as a biosphere. So it starts with a self-study that will be submitted to the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, who will at that point select 2 reviewers who will come to visit next summer, because in our case, we're due. In fact, our self-study is due for January 31st, 2024. And then they will address, they will send comments, we'll have to address them, and it will be resubmitted to the Canadian Commission and will be sent in September at UNESCO for approval to keep the designation or not. So it's really the responsibility of all of us in the biosphere to really think about it, work together to be able to really get the information, but also to find ways to bring the activities to promote the different mandates of the biosphere. And I should say it has been wonderful. Just yesterday, we had a meeting for the self-study and having Indigenous, non-Indigenous people working together to try to gather information. We decided one thing that will probably be the first time for UNESCO to look at is that because of Indigenous traditional knowledge, it's mostly oral, we will be doing videos. And we'll be adding the link to the videos in the report to show that for Indigenous people, it's not just a question of writing down a report, but it's way more than that. And this is part of the spirit of co-governance. We're not just taking the direction from the Western mindset that we often have in these reports. So it's a challenge. As I said, we're not an egg system in our case, where you have a core area that is condensed. Our core area is 725 kilometers long, very thin in some places, especially towards Hamilton. But it's a challenge that is good at the same time in terms of showing that we can make it possible to link all the partners, to link all of us for one goal, is the celebration of a spatial ecosystem that is highly diverse and that has a lot of culture, a lot of different components that needs to be protected. So this dark line in the middle is so important for a lot of people, but also for a lot of biodiverse ecosystem, from plants to animals. It's a corridor, it's a cultural corridor, historical corridor, but also a biological corridor. And so we have to keep it as protected as possible. And I'm hoping, in fact, that more and more people will join us to help to give data for the self-study, but also to be involved in the different actions that we're trying to do. Because by the end, the NEBN is a broker. The partners are the ones who are doing the actions, that are in the field, that are the expert, and that can really contribute to all these mandates. So just to put in perspective, so we have to deal with the MAB strategy, which is a 2015-2025, the Lima Action Plan, which is a 2016-2025 with the declaration. And these are the four components going from biodiversity restoration, the question of building sustainable, healthy, equitable communities, biodiversity and sustainability science and education for sustainable development, as well as supporting mitigation and adaptation to climate change and other aspects of environmental change. So it's a big mandate for biosphere. We're just starting in our case, but I think it's where it becomes important to think about partners. We do not call stakeholders. We felt that it's not the right word. We rather like talking about partners. Because by the end, it's a network of networks, and we have a lot of partners in different places. This is a launch with the Niagara Escarpment Corridor Alliance that is protecting, or wants to protect, a large connectivity between the escarpment and different components of the region around Blue Mountain and Collingwood. So we need pretty much everybody to be at the table to be able to protect all that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Liette. That was spectacular. And what a lovely lunch that looked like. It looked delicious from here. I'm curious, you talk about these partners, and I mean, friendly lunches is a part of this. There's all sorts of great things that come about from collaborations like this. Are there any challenges when you're working with all these different groups, with all these different motivations and places that they are and everything else? Anything that you can speak to that is a bit tricky to sort of navigate as you're building up this network?
Yeah, in fact, the big challenge that we have to deal now is first to try to acquire the data of many organizations, many partners, and also to reconnect. I should say one thing that has been a bit of a challenge is that because it was the Niagara Escarpment Commission until recently, especially municipalities that have been dealing with the NEC as a regulatory body, they often don't understand the difference between the biosphere designation and the regulatory component of the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So that's the main challenge. Is now we're reconnecting with municipalities, and in fact we have close to 17 of the 39 that have sent even letters of endorsement. So it shows that there's really a better understanding and a better support coming from the municipalities, but we still have a bit some work to do to re-educate, in fact, what we are versus what it was before.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer. I do want to note, I started with a question, but any of our YouTube audience, if you guys want to chime in the chat, please do. We'd love to take questions. We've got about 10 minutes together, so feel free to ask anything. And if you have any follow-up questions after the fact, we can make sure Liette gets those as well. I know we've got a lot of people tuning in, so any queries you have would be spectacular. Now, you highlighted iNaturalist as a great tool for sort of getting this broad-scale data across this whole network. I did bring this up and I shared it in the chat as well. iNaturalist is a spectacular citizen science tool. Is there anything else that you're using to try and sort of bring together the power of the community and the people that live in these regions that aren't necessarily a part of the organizing committee for all this, but to utilize that expertise and interest in these areas?
Yeah, but we have different groups. We can talk about the Bangwagi Alliance in the Bruce Peninsula with the First Nations there, the Suging, that are really involving a lot of young, so the kids and the young adults. We have, as I said, the Wild School in Blue Mountain that has also been quite active in bringing people. We are trying to do a lot here in the Niagara region as well in terms of connecting with different groups and different, especially youth group that are interested in working in this. It's amazing. It's when you start talking to people, oh, well, why not? You know, and they get more and more involved gradually. They understand the importance, especially when they start enjoying. As you said, you like the Glen, for example. But going to the Glen, it's great. But how many people understand the importance of this ecosystem in terms of its Carolinian forest? There's a lot of biodiversity. I always bring my students when I do the field course on biodiversity in the biosphere. I bring them there to show how, you know, when an environment is at this point getting stabilized in some way, it can help to really show the importance of carbon sequestration, biodiversity, all these aspects that you cannot necessarily see if you stay downtown, you know.
I love that you mentioned this. One thing that has really worked with our organization and some of our partners generally is public libraries are a really underserved community resource hub for a lot of stories like this, because the people that are there haven't necessarily been introduced to these ideas, and you reach the widest possible swath of the public. So I hope that's something that you're either doing or considering, but it's a very neat inroads into all that.
Yeah, in fact, I should say that because I have a UNESCO chair on community sustainability, so I'm connected to UNESCO in many ways. Before COVID, I should say, now we are hoping starting in the winter to restart a lot of that. But I used to have community cafes in the library, exactly. Nice. And we had one, for example, about the designation of the biosphere, for example. So we have been doing quite a lot of these things, yeah.
Very nice. I hope it kicks off with a bang coming up this next semester. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we hope.
So there's a lot of conservation efforts happening across Canada and around the world now that aren't sort of what people, I guess, are used to. I mean, I grew up with Parks Canada was my go-to thing. Okay, there's rangers, there's conservation officers, there's a visitor center, all this stuff. There's now key biodiversity areas, there's biosphere networks. Is there an enforcement mechanism for any of this? Like, is it just highlighting the work that's being done, fostering these collaborations, or are there people involved in some way or hope to be involved in some way that can actually, you know, keep this area as pristine or as nice as possible in the years to come?
Yeah, but we have a lot more. And this is where, you know, I talk about partners. And this is why it becomes very important to talk about partners. Because when you look at, okay, we have national parks, we have provincial parks, which are officially designated as conservation areas, but you have the conservation area authorities that have their own conservation space. Many of them now are becoming OECM, so they're becoming more official conservation label under the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So this is another component. But it's also important to understand we have the Bruce Peninsula, the Bruce Trail Conservancy, we have the Niagara Escarpment Conservancy, we have the Nature Conservancy of Canada that have acquired, and even here in the in the Niagara region, we have the Niagara Land Trust that have acquired land for protection. And so that's the thing, is there are many partners. And it's important to have them at the table the same way that we have Parks Canada, the way that we have the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So we have several partners. We often, it's not just one. We have to remember, Ivor, that biospheres are not legal entity. We are just a designation. And that's something that we still have a lot of education to do, especially with the private sector and municipalities. We're not a regulatory body. We're just a designation. It's not a legal entity. The legal entity itself is the Niagara Escarpment Commission with the core zone.
I'm glad you highlighted all that. I mean, that's the essence of what we're talking about today. And it's something that when I was in the Niagara region living there, it's really noteworthy how many different little parks and reserves and things of all kinds, all the way up to, honestly, to Tobermory and beyond, are sort of run by different organizations and groups. So I'm really glad we highlighted that. Liette, time flies and you're having fun. We are nearing the end of our proposed program here. So again, if people do have any additional questions, they can follow up with us. I'll put our email up on the screen in just a second, so you can feel free to message us. Oh, that's in our email. I'll find our email. There's our email. You can email us. We'll get it to the CCIUCN team. We'd love to pass along any additional queries that you might have. We do have another program coming up in early 2024, so stay tuned for information about that. But Liette, before we bring in Laurel and say a joint farewell for everyone, is there any final message about this that you want to share with our audience? Any hopeful last words to leave us on today?
But I guess for those, if there are some from this region or all the Niagara Escarpment itself, please join us. We always welcome people to help us, especially right now when we are doing the self-study and we have a lot of writing to do. But it's also a question of, for anybody having an idea of how to bring conservation in another way. It may be a landowner, and we have some around here, that have decided to go for an eco-gift and become a conservation easement. So these are places where they can become OECMs as well. So it really contributes by the end for a better conservation. And this is important, especially in Southern Ontario, where the pressure for development is so strong. So any little land being protected is already a big contribution.
Yep, spectacular. Thank you for that optimistic answer, Liette. Laurel, I'm going to bring you back in if you want to join us. A big thank you to our audience today for joining Across Canada and Beyond. Really appreciate you being here. Again, do check out that YouTube link if you want to see our other two podcasts of the CCIUCN series. And for now, have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy the weekend. The Americans have Thanksgiving, and we can pretend it's a second Thanksgiving for us and go and have some extra turkey or whatever else you want to eat. But for now, see you soon. Have a wonderful day.